Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Jeffrey Horowitz. I'm the founder and artistic director of Theater for New Audience. Our home is Polanski Shakespeare Center in downtown Brooklyn, which is built on the ancestral homeland of the Lenape and Canarsie people. Thank you for joining us for this exploration of Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice, which is going to take place tonight and this coming Saturday at 3 p.m. And each exploration is going to last about an hour, and that's going to include a post-performance talk with the company, which I'm going to be moderating, and you'll all be able to ask questions. We'll explain how that function is going to work at the end of the first part of this presentation. The exploration is part of our Artists and Community series that explores vital connections between theater and our world. And all these projects have a spirit of inquiry, and they take many forms, from live streams to podcasts, a diverse range of plays by Shakespeare and other contemporary authors. The exploration is produced by Theater for New Audience's Merle DeBusky Studio Program. Nydia Medina is the director of that program. Merle was a beloved member of Theater for New Audience's board. He was a great press agent who had an extraordinary influence on New York theater. I'm going to introduce now Nydia, who's going to tell you a little bit about our DeBusky Studio Program. Please welcome Nydia.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much, Jeffrey. As Jeffrey mentioned, my name is Nydia Medina. I am director of the studio and associate producer here at Tofana. I'm just going to take a quick second to answer the burning question in everyone's mind. What is the studio? Okay, so my favorite definition of this is that it's Tofana's R&D wing. It's where we test, experiment, explore, and most of all, we're supporting artists in their work without pressure or expectation. So the great thing about the studio is when an artist has a new play or an old play they want to explore, an idea, a crazy experiment, we can give that space, and whatever the outcome, either, ooh, that didn't work, or wow, I think we're onto something, or yes, and, or maybe let's try something different, then every single version of it is a success. So the magic of the studio is definitely present in this Zoom today. And I just want to get you right back to Jeffrey so we can begin. So just thank you all for being here and welcome. Back to you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Nydia. Thank you. So tonight, the exploration of The Merchant of Venice is directed by ARBUS. She's our resident director. The cast is ISABEL, ARRAIZA, DANAYA, ESPERANZA, Ian Lassiter, AJAY, NAIDU, ALFREDO, NARCISO, Graham Winton, and John Douglas Thompson is Shylock. For over a decade, John and Aaron have had a very fruitful collaboration at Theater for New Audience. They've worked together on Shakespeare's Othello, Macbeth, Ibsen's A Doll's House, and Strindberg's The Father, which were played in rotating repertory. And Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice is going to be their next project together. It's the first time that Theater for New Audience has produced Merchant since Darko Dresniak staged the play featuring F. Murray Abraham as Shylock in 2007 and again in 2011. And tonight, you're going to have a behind-the-scenes look at the initial steps and their steps in our journey towards this full production of Merchant. Before the rehearsals of this exploration began, John and Aaron and I spoke with Ayanna Thompson. She is a Shakespeare scholar and author, and she's chair of Theater for New Audience's Council of Scholars. And we talked with her about race in this particular play. To give you another bit of context, the company has been in rehearsal for 3 days, And tonight, you're going to look at 4 scenes. And then we're going to have this discussion. And then on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, the company is going to go back into rehearsal. And then at 3 o'clock on Saturday, they're going to explore Act 4, Scene 1, which is the trial. Today is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. That's an international Memorial Day commemorating the end of the tragedy of the Holocaust that, of course, occurred during the Second World War. It's impossible to produce The Merchant of Venice without acknowledging this tragedy, and that the play provokes controversy. Is it an anti-Semitic work and Shylock a wicked, toxic monster? Or is it a remarkable, multifaceted play about prejudice and hatred in which Shylock and all the characters are human, complex, and flawed? This key question is what the artists have been grappling with in this week. When Shakespeare wrote The Merchant of Venice in about 1594, Jews had been banished from England since 1290, approximately 300 years. Shakespeare's play was also probably in conversation with Marlowe's play, The Jew of Malta, which had first been performed in 1589. Usury, loaning at excessive interest, had been banned in canonical and secular law for centuries. But when Shakespeare wrote Merchant of Venice, loaning at interest of up to about 10% was tolerated in England, but it wasn't legal. Now, at the beginning of the play, Bassanio has gone to his very good friend Antonio, who is a merchant of Venice, because Bassanio is heavily in debt. He appeals to Antonio to loan him money. Bassanio's plan is to travel to Belmont to woo Portia, who is a rich heiress. If he's successful, Bassanio will, as Portia's husband, become wealthy. He'll be able to clear all his debts. But Antonio doesn't have available cash. He's heavily invested in shipping. And as he says, all his fortunes are at sea. Antonio says to Bassanio to please ask around Venice to see if anyone will furnish credit to Antonio so he can loan the funds to Bassanio. In the scene we're about to show you, explore with you, Bassanio has solicited Shylock to make the loan to Antonio, and Antonio will enter the scene later. An agreement will be struck. This is the background. Bassanio is played by Alfredo Narciso, Shylock by John Douglas Thompson, and Antonio, who will enter the scene later, will be played by Ian Lassiter.
3,000 ducats? Well.
Aye, sir. For 3 months.
For 3 months? Well.
For the which, as I told you, Antonio shall be bound.
Antonio shall become bound. Well.
Will you stead me? Will you pleasure me? Shall I know your answer?
3,000 ducats for 3 months and Antonio bound.
Your answer to that?
Antonio is a good man.
Have you heard any imputation to the contrary?
Oh, no. My meaning in saying he is a good man is to have you understand me that he is sufficient. Yet, his means are in supposition. He hath an argosy bound to Tripoli, another to India. I understand, moreover, upon the Rialto, he hath a third at Mexico, a fourth for England, and other ventures he hath squandered abroad. But ships are but boards, sailors but men. There be land rats and water rats, water thieves and land thieves, I mean pirates, and then there is the peril of the waters, winds, and rocks. The man is notwithstanding sufficient. 3,000 ducats, I think I may take his bond.
Be assured you may.
I will be assured I may, and that I may be assured I will bethink me. May I speak with Antonio?
If it please you to dine with us.
Yes, to smell pork, to eat of the habitation which your prophet right conjure the devil into. I will buy with you, sell with you, talk with you, walk with you, and so following, but I will not eat with you, drink with you, nor pray with you. What news on the Rialto? Who's he comes here?
This is Signor Antonio.
How like a fawning publican he looks. I hate him, for he is a Christian, but more for that in low simplicity he lends out money gratis and brings down the rate of usance here with us in Venice. If I can catch him once upon the hip, I will feed fat the ancient grudge I bear him. He hates our sacred nation, and he rails, even there where merchants most do congregate, on me, my bargains, and my well-won thrift, which he calls interest. Cursed be my tribe, if I forgive him.
Shylock, you hear?
I am debating of my present store, and by the near guess of my memory, I cannot instantly raise up the gross of full 3,000 ducats. What of that? Tubal, a wealthy Hebrew of my tribe, will furnish me. But soft, how many months do you desire? Rest you fair, good signor. Your worship was the last man in our mouths.
Shylock, albeit I neither lend nor borrow by taking nor by giving of excess, yet to supply the ripe wants of my friend, I'll break a custom. Is he yet possessed how much you would?
3,000 ducats.
And for 3 months?
I had forgot. 3 months. You told me so. Well, then, your bond. And let me see, but hear you, methoughts you said you neither lend nor borrow upon advantage.
I do never use it.
When Jacob grazed his uncle Laban's sheep, this Jacob from our holy Abram was, as his wise mother wrought in his behalf, the third possessor. He was the third.
And what of him? Did he take interest?
No, not take interest, not as you would say, directly interest. Mark what Jacob did. When Laban and himself compromised that all the eanlings which were streaked and pied should fall as Jacob's hire, the ewes being rank in end of autumn turned to the rams. And when the work of generation was between these woolly breeders in the act, the skillful shepherd piled me certain wands, and in the doing of the deed of kind, he stuck them up before the fulsome ewes, who then conceiving did in eaning time fall party colored lambs. And those were Jacob's. This was a way to thrive, and he was blessed. And thrift is blessing, if men steal it not.
This was a venture, sir, that Jacob served for, a thing not in his power to bring to pass, but swayed and fashioned by the hand of heaven. Was this inserted to make interest good, or is your gold and silver ewes and rams?
I cannot tell. I make it breed as fast. But note me, Signor.
Mark you this, Bassanio, the devil can cite scripture for his purpose. An evil soul producing holy witness is like a villain with a smiling cheek. A goodly apple, rotten at the core. What a goodly outside falsehood hath.
3,000 ducats. 'Tis a good round sum. 3 months from 12, and let me see the rate.
Well, Shylock, shall we be beholding to you?
Signor Antonio, many a time and oft In the Rialto, you have rated me about my monies and my usances. Still have I borne it with a patient shrug, for sufferance is the badge of all our tribe. You call me misbeliever, cutthroat dog, and spit upon my Jewish gabardine, and all for use of that which is mine own. Well then, it now appears you need my help. Go to then. You come to me and you say, Shylock, we would have monies. You say so, you that did void your room upon my beard and foot me as you spurn a stranger cur over your threshold. Monies is your suit. What should I say to you? Should I not say, hath a dog money? Is it possible a cur can lend 3,000 ducats? Or shall I bend low and in a bondman's key with bated breath and whispering humbleness say this, fair sir, you spat on me on Wednesday last, you spurned me such a day, another time you called me dog, and for these courtesies I'll lend you thus much monies.
I must like to call thee so again, to spit on thee again, to spurn thee too. If thou wilt lend us money, lend it not to thy friends. For when did friendship take breed for barren metal of his friend? But lend it rather to thine enemy, who, if he break, thou mayst take with better face, exact the penalty.
Why, look you how you storm. I would be friends with you and have your love. Forget the shames that you have stained me with, supply your present wants, and take no doint of uses for my monies, and you'll not hear me. This is kind I offer.
This were kindness.
This kindness will I show. Go with me to a notary and seal me there your single bond. And in a merry sport, if you repay me not on such a day, in such a place, such sum or sums as are expressed in the condition, let the forfeit be nominated for an equal pound of your fair flesh, to be cut off and taken in what part of your body pleaseth me.
Content of faith. I'll seal to such a bond, and say there is much kindness in the Jew.
You shall not seal to such a bond for me. I'll rather dwell in my necessity.
Oh, I fear not, man, I will not forfeit it. Within these 2 months, that's a month before this bond expires, I do expect return of thrice 3 times the value of this bond.
Oh, Father Abram, what these Christians are, whose own hard dealings teaches them suspect the thoughts of others. Pray you, tell me this. If he should break his day, what should I gain by the exaction of the forfeiture? A pound of man's flesh taken from a man is not so estimable, profitable neither, as flesh from muttons, beefs, or goats. I say, to buy his favor, I extend this friendship. If he will take it, so. If not, adieu. And for my love, I pray you, wrong me not.
Yes, Shylock, I will seal unto this bond.
Then meet me forthwith at the notary's, give him direction for this merry bond, and I will go and purse the ducat straight. See to my house, left in the fearful garb of an unthrifty knave. And presently I'll be with you.
I thee, gentle Jew. The Hebrew will turn Christian. He grows kind.
I like not fair terms in a villain's mind.
Come on. In this there can be no dismay. My ships come home a month before the day.
Thank you. We are now going to go to Act 2, Scene 3. We're in Shylock's house. Shylock, of course, is an Orthodox Jew. His servant, Lancelot, played by AJAY, NAIDU, is quitting. Shylock's daughter, Jessica, played by DANAYA Esperanza, observes that her home is hell, and Jessica is planning to elope with Lorenzo, a Christian.
I am sorry thou wilt leave my father so. Our house is hell, and thou, a merry devil, didst rob it of some taste of tediousness. Fare thee well. There is a ducat for thee, and Lancelot, soon at supper shalt thou see Lorenzo, who is thy new master's guest. Give him this letter, do it secretly, and so farewell. I would not have my father see me and talk with thee.
You? Tears exhibit my tongue, most beautiful pagan, most sweet Jew. If a Christian do not play the knave and get thee, I am much deceived. But adieu. These foolish drops do something drown my manly spirit. Adieu.
Farewell, good Lancelot. Alack, what heinous sin is it in me to be ashamed to be my father's child? But though I am a daughter to his blood, I am not to his manners. O Lorenzo, if thou keep promise, I shall end this strife, become a Christian, and thy loving wife.
Now, we go to Act 2, Scene 5. It's later that evening when Shylock returns home.
Now, thou shalt see. Thy eyes shall be thy judge, the difference of old Shylock and Bassanio. What, Jessica? Thou shalt not gormandize as thou hast done with me. What, Jessica? And sleep and snore and rend a Powell out. Why, Jessica, I say.
Why, Jessica?
Who bids thee call? I do not bid thee call.
Your worship was wont to tell me I could do nothing without bidding.
Call you? What is your will?
I am bid forth to supper, Jessica. These are my keys. But wherefore should I go? I am not bid for love. They flatter me, but yet I'll go in hate to feed upon the prodigal Christian. Jessica, my girl, look to my house. I am right loath to go. There is some ill a-brewing towards my rest, for I did dream of money bags tonight.
I beseech you, sir, go. My young master doth expect your reproach.
So do I his.
And they have conspired together. I will not say that you shall see a mask, but if you do, then it was not for nothing that my nose fell a-bleeding on Black Monday last at 6 o'clock in the morning. Falling out that year? On Ash Wednesday was 4 years in the afternoon.
But what, are there masks? Hear me, Jessica, lock up my doors. And when you hear the drum and the vile squealing of the wry-necked fife, clamber you not up to the casements then, nor thrust your head out into the public street to gaze on Christian fools with varnished faces, but stop my house's ears. I mean my casements. Let not the sound of shallow foppery enter my sober house. By Jacob's staff, I swear I have no mind of feasting forth tonight. But I will go. Go you before me, sirrah, and say I will come.
I will go before, sir. Look out at the window for all this. There will come a Christian by, will be worth a Jewess eye.
What says that fool of Hagar's offspring, huh?
His words were, farewell, mistress, nothing else.
The patch is kind enough, but a huge feeder. Snail slow in profit, and he sleeps by day more than the wildcat. Drones hive not with me. Therefore I part with him, and part with him to one that I would have him help to waste his borrowed purse. Well, Jessica, go in. Perhaps I will return immediately. Do as I bid you. Shut doors after you. Fast bind, fast find. A proverb never stale in thrifty mind.
Farewell. And if my fortune be not crossed, I have a father, you a daughter lost.
We'll now go to the last scene of the exploration for this evening. It's Act 3, Scene 1. Solario, played by Graham Winton, and Solanio, played by AJAY NAIDU, are friends of Bassanio and Antonio. And they are discussing that, in fact, some of Antonio's ships have wrecked. Meanwhile, Shylock has discovered Jessica's flight and that she's stolen his money and jewels, including a turquoise ring of Leia, Shylock's wife. Shylock promises to claim his bond. Tubal, Shylock's friend, played by ALFREDO, NARCISO, reports that Jessica has sold Leia's ring for 2,000 ducats in Genoa.
Now, what news on the Rialto?
Why, yet it lives there unchecked, that Antonio hath a ship of rich lading wracked on the narrow seas. The Goodwins, I think they call the place, a very dangerous flat and fatal, where the carcasses of many a tall ship lie buried, as they say, if my gossip report be an honest woman of her word.
I would she were as lying a gossip as that ever napped ginger, or made her neighbors believe she wept for the death of a third husband. But it is true, without any slips of prolixity or crossing the plain highway of talk, that the good Antonio, the honest Antonio, oh, that I had a title enough to keep his name company.
Come, the full stop.
Huh? What sayst thou? Why, the end is he have lost a ship.
I would it might prove the end of his losses.
Oh, let me say amen betimes, lest the devil cross my prayer, for here he comes in the likeness of a Jew. How now, Shylock? What news amongst the merchants?
You knew none so well as you of my daughter's flight.
That's certain. I, for my part, knew the tailor that made the wings she flew withal.
And Shylock, for his own part, knew the bird was fledge, and that is the complexion of them all to leave the dam.
She is damned for it.
That's certain, if the devil may be her judge.
My own flesh and blood to rebel.
Out upon it, old carrion. Rebels it at these years?
I say my daughter is my flesh and my blood.
There is more difference between thy flesh and hers than between jet and ivory. More between your bloods than there is between red wine and Rhenish. But tell us, do you hear whether Antonio have any loss at sea or no?
There I have another bad match. A bankrout, a prodigal, who dare scarce show his head on the Rialto, a beggar that was used to come so smug upon the bar, so smug upon the mart. Let him look to his bond. He was wont to call me usurer. Let him look to his bond. He was wont to lend money for a Christian curtsy. Let him look to his bond.
Why, I am sure if he forfeit, thou wilt not take his flesh. What's that good for?
To bait fish withal. If it will feed nothing else, it will feed my revenge. He hath disgraced me and hindered me 500,000, laughed at my losses, mocked at my gains, scorned my nation, thwarted my bargains, cooled my friends, heated mine enemies. And what's his reason? I am a Jew. Hath not a Jew eyes? Hath not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions, fed with the same food, hurt with the same weapons, subject to the same diseases, healed by the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer as a Christian is? If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge? If we are like you in the rest, we will resemble you in that. If a Jew wrong a Christian, what is his humility? Revenge. If a Christian wrong a Jew, what should his sufferance be by Christian example? Why revenge? The villainy you teach me, I will execute, and it shall go hard. I will better the instruction.
Gentlemen, my master Antonio is at his house and desires to speak with you both.
We have been up and down to seek him.
Here comes another of the tribe. A third cannot be matched unless the devil himself turned Jew.
How now, Tubal? What news from Genoa? Hast thou found my daughter?
I often came where I did hear of her, but cannot find her.
My fair. A diamond gone cost me 2,000 ducats in Frankfurt. The curse never fell upon our nation till now. I never felt it till now. 2,000 ducats in that and other precious jewels. I would my daughter were dead at my foot and the jewels in her ear. Would she were hearsed at my foot and the ducats in her coffin. No news of them. Oh, why so? And I know not what's spent in the search. Why the loss upon loss. The thief gone with so much, and so much to find the thief, and no satisfaction, no revenge, no ill luck stirring, but what lights on my shoulders, no sighs a breathing, but what lights on my breathing, no tears, but of my shedding.
Yes, other men have ill luck too.
What?
Antonio, as I heard in Genoa.
What? Ill luck. Ill luck.
Hath an argosy cast away coming from Tripoli.
Thank God. I thank God. Is it true? Is it true?
Spoke with some of the sailors that escaped the rack.
Oh, I think good too. Oh, good news, good news. Heard in Genoa.
Your daughter spent in Genoa, as I heard one night, 80 ducats.
Thou stick a dagger in me. Oh, I shall never see my gold again. 80 ducats in a city? 80 ducats?
There came divers of Antonio's creditors in my company to Venice that swear he cannot choose but break.
I am very glad of it. I'll beg him. I'll torture him. I am glad of it.
One of them showed me a ring that he had of your daughter for a monkey.
Out upon her. Thou torturest me too. Well, it was my turquoise. I had it of Leia when I was a bachelor. I would not have given it for a wilderness of monkeys.
But Antonio is certainly undone.
Nay, that's true. That's very true. Go, Tubal. Fee me an officer. Bespeak him a fortnight before. I will have the heart of him if he forfeit. For were he out of Venice, I can make what merchandise I will. Go, Tubal, and meet me at our synagogue. Go, Tubal, at our synagogue, Tubal.
Thank you. I want to just correct something that I said in the introduction of this. I mentioned that Jessica had sold Leia's ring for ducats. Of course, it wasn't. It was for a monkey. So now we're going to start our post-performance discussion with ARIN and the company. I'm going to moderate it, but first I want to introduce Tatiana Casas-Quinones, who's the manager of our humanities program, and she's going to explain how this discussion and the question and answer function is going to work. So please welcome Tatiana.
Hello, everyone. As Jeffrey said, my name is Tatiana, and we're going to have a conversation for about 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions. At the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a button marked Q&A, and it will open a chat box to type in your question, and you can do this anytime during the talk. We'll have TFANA staff monitoring the questions, and we'll select as many as we can. If your question is selected, a staff member will reply in the Q&A chat box to let you know, so keep an eye for the reply. When it's time to ask your question, you'll be connected to the conversation just with your audio, not your video. So again, at any time during the talk, please use the Q&A function to send us a question, and we'll do our best to get to them. Now, thank you very much, everyone, and welcome back Jeffrey and tonight's cast, along with director ARIN ARBUS.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'll wait till everyone gets on here. Great. Okay. That was terrific. Thank you. Thank you. So ARIN, let me begin with the first question to you, and then the rest of the company could, take it up. How does this play live when it's cast diversely? How does that work? Because the power structure changes in the play, and it's not clear, or there is no one party who is hated or has hatred. Could you talk about that? And I'd love to hear from the rest of the company.
Sure, I'll start, and then I'm sure everyone else will have a lot to say too. But yeah, the theatrical meaning of a production is created not just by the text, but by the bodies who are performing it. I'm interested in what this play has to say to us here in America in 2021. I think Shakespeare is depicting a world which is, although distinct, I think it has. I think the play has a lot to say to us now, and I think the world that he has created connects to our world in very powerful ways, powerful and disturbing ways. It's a deeply stratified society in which there are laws and systems that enforce inequality based on race, religion, sexuality, and gender. Systems in which certain people are allowed to hold on to power and other people are prevented from holding power. There is a biased justice system in this world. There is predatory lending, one could argue. There is discriminatory practices in housing and commercial markets. There's a ghetto. And so I think interpreting it, having this group of artists interpret it, enables the play to speak to us in new ways. I think it enables the play to be as problematic as it really is, and as vital as it really is. So those are some of my thoughts, but I'd love to hear from the rest of the company.
I'd also love to hear why you think the play is the problem. Maybe someone could also say that too.
The people in it are pretty terrible to each other, and the world that they have created is pretty terrible too. So those. What do you guys think?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, John, please.
Oh, you sure? Oh, okay. For all the reasons that Aaron has stated, in addition to the play's kind of about ultimately an outsider, that I think you can take any group that has felt marginalized or pushed out in some way, or being of a minority classification, could almost be Shylock. So I look at Shylock as this kind of a universal character that speaks and stands up for the outsider in all of us. So in that sense, it will always be a play for the time that it's produced in. But many of the themes in the play kind of mirror what's going on now. One of the reasons that I really respond to it is because it is about an outsider in a big sense for me. And I can look at my own self as being a minority, as being a Black male, being an outsider in the culture that I live in today, in the country that I live in today. So I feel anyone who's in that particular predicament, it could be me, it could be someone else who feels that they're an outsider, can wear the fabric of Shylock. And Shylock is a representation, albeit specifically it is a Jewish character, as Shakespeare wrote it. But I think it could serve for many different types of people in many different types of situations, which then makes it extremely universal and timely. So that's all I had to say.
Yeah, and I would add that too, to say that there is a lot of complexity within the BIPOC community. And the casting that we have here, I think we have a lot of Latinx actors. And within the Latinx community, there is a lot of colorism. There's a lot of colonial mentality, which is basically kowtowing to a sort of mainstream culture and a tendency to try to assimilate rather than to maintain your culture. And so I think that that's something that and that's something that we all spoke about in the room. And I'll let other people talk about that if they want to.
Yeah.
Oh, do you want to go ahead, Ian?
Yes, Danaya, please. Danaya, please.
Thank you. I'll also say that John talked about this in rehearsal, but there are Black Jews, and like in many societies, they are the lowest rung on the ladder. So, and as we know, Israelites were not white, right? We think of them as white, or we think of Jewish people as white in this country, but there's no Jewish race in terms of skin color. And Isabel and I were talking about this. There's no gene, right? There's no Jewish gene. And Jews have been persecuted for so long in every country. I'm Cuban. Jews are, in Spain were persecuted, and there's so many families that had to convert that we don't know, like we might all have some Jewish lineage, right? Like it doesn't matter. Our race doesn't necessarily matter in that case. And I think what John is saying is important, but also it all comes down to the darker you are, the more marginalized you are in all of these communities, in the Latinx communities, and in the US, in all of our respective countries. So I think that, especially right now, it's very important to put that front and center and have these conversations around that.
Danaya, when you say put that front and center, what is the that? That we're all different no matter what color we are, or we all have, could you just talk a little bit about that? What is the that we're putting front and center?
Sure. For me, it's that the last thing I said, the darker your skin color, the more marginalized you are, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what society you belong to. And I don't want to speak for everyone here, but I do know that I can say that in all of our, at least for the Latinos, in all of our countries, colorism is very real. There's skin lightening creams. And it happens it happens in every country where there are people of color. And I think it's very important in this country right now to acknowledge that and to have conversations around it, because ignoring it has been very dangerous.
Yeah, and I think also too, like, throughout time, we've seen different empires, whether it be the Romans, the Spaniards, the Brits, and now the Americans. If your culture has the power, you maintain the power, then you create a hierarchy whereas your standard is at the top and everybody else falls down that line. And depending on where people are on that pyramid, they're going to spit on the people below them so that they feel like that they belong part of the more accepted class. And it's a horrible fact about internalized racism. And it's something that I think is really sort of heightened in the work that is happening here, I believe.
Ian, were you going to say something?
I mean, just basically piggybacking off of what everybody has already been saying beautifully, that if you can make an analog for if Christianity is like where you are able to make your money, that's that's assimilation, and then Judaism is the darker your skin tone. It's black. Assimilation is a real issue that happens in communities of color, whatever your community is, Latino, African American, Caribbean, Asian. So not being able, if you start marrying, let's say I marry a white woman and I have a fairer skinned child, and then I don't speak Spanish to that child, and I can try to make a quote unquote easier life for that person, but they're losing a part of themselves by ignoring where they came from. That's something we've been talking about too, with like, what is this analog of Christianity and Judaism, where as it is your culture and race, which you kind of have to, in this world of the play and in the world at large, many times people have to turn their back on their own culture and their own race in order to make some money, and how damaging that can be to the individual, and what are the larger repercussions of that reality. So that's been coming up for this too.
And the play can kind of, what's really unique about what I think we're trying to do with such a diverse cast, and someone like me playing Shylock, is to allow what's happening in our contemporary lives to live and breathe in the play. We deal with religious persecution, racial persecution, And the idea of the intersectionality of religion and race seems to play heavily in a play like this. And it's even fully brought out within the casting of it. So I go right back to the thing that I always loved about Shakespeare, in that it's just a beautiful canvas to paint on. And obviously Shakespeare did some of the painting for us, or gave us the canvas. But I also think Shakespeare said, here, put yourself on this canvas. Here are the words. Here are the ideas. They are universal. They will never run out of time. And all you need to do is tell me your story through the vehicle of this play that I'm giving you. So it's fascinating. I mean, I remember doing Othello. We were talking about this before. And when we did it with Tefana, it was right when Obama was being elected as our first Black president. And our play, without us hitting it over the head, played right into that, because audiences brought that in when they sat down and watched it. But there is something really interesting that's going on in our country today, where you can look at the violence and the hatred between Christians and Jews and substitute it with white nationalist and Black Lives Matter. I mean, there are so many, I'm just spitballing here, but there are so many things happening as our world is churning, and particularly our country is churning in so many different directions, that a play like this is really unique in having us tell a story and create discussion. I definitely want to create discussion about diverse audience coming to see, hopefully, diverse productions of these plays, shake them up a little bit, make them look like the community that we actually live in, and see how those stories resonate. There's always a reason to do this. It's never why Merchant of Venice, why do Shakespeare? There's always going to be a reason to do that, just because it is. But why do it the way that we're doing it makes it quite unique.
I absolutely agree. And I also, when I see productions of these really old plays that are not reflecting the society in which I live, I question why they're being done. Because Shakespeare was reflecting his society, and his society was reflected back in the people in the audience. And if we aren't doing that with these plays, then I don't think we should be doing them. I think that this is the only way that we should keep doing this work. I think that's the only way it's universal. Because that's what Shakespeare was writing for his time. So if we don't take, like you said, John, the vehicle of the words, a vessel, and fill it with our time, then I don't understand why we keep doing it.
Anyone else want to comment on that? How the play operates in our time through the prism in which you all are playing it? Isabel or Ajay or Graham?
Well, if I'd like to say that in the initial introduction, Jeffrey, you raised a question, which was whether or not this was, an anti-Semitic diatribe, or was it a play about the failings of everyone within it. And I mean, for me, quite obviously, it's the latter answer. I feel that that we do a sort of a disservice to Shakespeare if we presume that this is a one-sided argument. I think the play, the entire function of the piece is to raise the burning and very uncomfortable question as to whether or not, what is right and what is wrong. And while these people do treat each other despicably all the way, again and again, all the way through it, I find that most of the characters are deeply human and brilliantly, obviously, by Shakespeare, contradicted. And that is, we can draw direct parallels to our society in those contradictions, in the now, always, with any of his plays, but this particularly, because the racism in the play functions as an inescapable world for everyone. And so everyone within the play exists in contradiction to the culture of the play itself. I'm sorry if that's a little too heady, but I just mean that everyone is in a fight all the way through it. And that's where we are here in America right now. We're in a big fight. And we're all in a fight with the fight. So I think it, I think it's very salient and an apposite play to be doing right now.
Thank you. Isabel, you want to add anything into this? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I'm taking it all in. I go back and forth with this play in terms of that debate that we've had for 400 years. Is it an anti-Semitic play? Is it not? To be honest, I'm going to say something controversial right now. I think sometimes with certain works of Shakespeare, to me, the only way that we could be having this conversation right now is to have such a diverse cast. To me, this makes sense that we're having this conversation. I don't know if I'd be willing to sit again watching A Merchant of Venice with an all-white cast, right? To me, context is everything. And, I brought up in our conversations 1 week for the last 3 days, what if it's anti-Semitic and that's okay? Shakespeare was a man of his time, This is a happy ending for the Christians in England, He had a good, they did him good. He's gonna go to heaven. They converted him to a Christian. And, in like 2021, my reading is this is egregious, this is terrible. But if we go back to the context of it, I think we could just be debating and never really know. So I go back and forth. Sometimes I think it is, sometimes I'm very upset at this play. Sometimes I read it and I find the beautiful humanity, which clearly is in there. But for example, to me, having such a diverse cast creates a different reading of the play, right? You have a Puerto Rican Portia, you have a Cuban Afro-Latina Jessica. This totally, and creates a space for intersectionality that I think it's really rich and I think allows us to give a different reading. So I'm still on the fence about this play, you guys.
Can I just say something?
Please.
I don't want to be the only one who doesn't speak. So
I was going to get to you, Graham.
So sit back and relax. I got about an hour here for you. No, listen, just to keep it short, I think that two members of the audience in Shakespeare's time would have walked out of this play with two different visions of what they had just seen. I think two members of the audience today are going to walk out of whatever production they see. I don't care who's in it. And they're going to have two different ideas of what they just saw. And one person might walk out on the sidewalk and so, that's just an anti-Semitic play. I can't believe it. I don't know who that person might be. Another person might walk out and say, my God, what an unbelievable exploration of racism and bigotry in our world today. But for me, to have this cast doing it is going to make those conversations explode. Whereas in today's world, I think, whereas if you did have an all-white cast, people might want to go out, walk out on the street and say, yeah, that's absolutely right. let's go get a pizza. So, you know, to me, it just infuses an incredible amount of today's humanity into it. And, you know, I'd love to hear what the people out on the street have to say after watching any of this production with this cast. So that's all I had to say. And I'll be back with more later.
Is that a promise, Graham?
No, I'm not coming anywhere.
Listen, just to the audience who's watching, we're going to start the Q&A in a few minutes. This is a reminder, send your questions and because we're gonna get to them, but we need to get your questions in order to queue you up. So don't forget to send your questions. We'll start in just in a few minutes. So I have a question for the group, and anyone can answer this. Do you have any feelings about when the play was done and Shylock says in his monologue, "Hath not a Jew eyes"? Do you think in England of the 16th century that people laughed at that? That was meant to be, are you kidding? Of course not. Jews were expelled. How did they ever? Come on. Or do you think it stirred sympathy? Or both? How do you think the audience in 16th, 17th century England responded to that speech?
You mean the speech hath, I'm sorry, go on, Aaron.
Hath not a Jew eyes. You know, the famous speech of Shylock's.
Okay, Aaron, you go, and I'll say something after.
I'll be fast. I think the audience was undoubtedly anti-Semitic at the time. You know,
And how do they respond, do you think?
I don't know the answer to that. You know, it depends how it's played, but I think Shakespeare is grappling with he is writing a play knowing his audience is anti-Semitic. I mean, it was illegal to be Jewish in England. I mean, like how, there you go. And from my point of view, he's like, he's playing with that. He's playing with their hate and their, you know, stereotypes and he is writing in a way that his play will be produced.
He's being provocative, you're saying.
I think he is being provocative. I think he does something so, I find that like the structure of Shakespeare's play is so amazing. And I think he's like, he gets the audience and he gets them to become kind of bloodthirsty. And then he like shows that to them. He like makes them complicit and shows them their own hypocrisy. That is to me what how like structurally how this play functions.
Yeah, you know, once I did a production of Richard III, and there's that whole section where we went through the audience, and I was basically like doing a little campaign show with the church people there saying, I don't want to take the kingship, but I really do. And I got the whole audience to become on my side. This was Shakespeare's writing. And then they become complicit in what Richard's actions are, almost all the way through the play. So you're right, Aaron, in that Shakespeare's really clever with doing that. And he does that in this play too. But I do feel certainly back then, as you were talking, Jeffrey, that the whole hath not a Jew eyes was probably laughing. Yeah. I mean, there are two different views, maybe there's a third and a fourth, of a humanist view and an anti-Semitic view. And I think the play lives in both. It's not one or the other. And certainly the way people interpret, when you sit down and read it, you may look at it and say, oh, wow, this is anti-Semitic. Then you go see a performance of it, it doesn't feel that way, or it may feel that way. But I think when Shakespeare wrote it, due to censorship, I think he was basically catering to his audience. And the Christians at that time certainly didn't like, as even today, I mean, maybe it was to a stronger extent then, who knows? But in different parts of the world, it's horrible, right? What Christians have done. So back then, obviously, it was meant for Christians to laugh at this particular Jewish archetype character that was full of all the worst things, all the stereotypes that Christians believe Jews to have. In the same way you can say that, like I said earlier, where you could take the play, rush it up to 2021, and look at the Christians as racist and the Jews as Black. And so then it's a caricature of what they think Black people actually are, to be laughed at, to be ridiculed, to be pushed to the side, to be treated in a particular way, which is totally allowable. It's not as if you do this and you're going to be penalized for it. You can do this and get away with it. So that's where there's a contemporary idea in the play. And perhaps in the same way that Shakespeare will allow people to see themselves, to see their hypocrisy, to really see it, and then maybe think about it and maybe walk out of the theater a better person, or at least with more knowledge about themselves so they can behave better in the future. So, but definitely back in Shakespeare's time, I think they were rolling with laughter. And when Shylock converted to Christianity, they probably broke out into an applause, a spontaneous applause. Yes, that is good punishment. And he's going to be better now because he's going to be a Christian. That's my thought.
I agree that was probably the response of a lot of the audience. But I also have to say I agree with Aaron that I don't think that Shakespeare, if you look at the language, I don't think that Shakespeare felt the same way. I think he was a smart human, a queer human who was also dealing with that. And we haven't talked about that in the play, but that is also in the play. And he knew what he had to do to not be censored. But I think that if he, like us as artists, are, think if we all have some strain, we want to change, we do this work to change people, right? We tell these stories to make people think about the choices that they're making. And at the end of that speech that you mentioned, Jeffrey, hath not a Jew eyes.
Right.
Shylock says, "The villainy you teach me, I will execute." That's not a funny line. That is true. That's the truth of that society at that time. Even if he made them laugh throughout that, I don't know how else to read that line but to believe that Shakespeare knew that that was true. The villainy you teach me, you Christians, you have taught me, I will execute.
Well, that's how he flips the script on
right,
people.
exactly.
He flips the script on him. But yeah, so he knows what he's doing. But yeah, you're right. You're right.
And hopefully someone in the audience held on to that, right? Like, because he had to be, he wanted to be produced. He didn't want to be censored, but he gets those messages in there, and there's a lot throughout the script. There's a lot of that throughout the script.
This is a great place to pause. Thank you, Danaya. Could we have let's go to the questions, okay? This is very rich soil you've all established. So could I have, this is Jean Aaron. Tatiana, can you make Jean live? And Jean, could you ask your question? We won't see you, but we'll hear you. Everyone will hear you. If we could go to Jean's question, please. Is that all right? While we...
Oh, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Hi, Jean.
Hi, it's just been fantastic. It's so great to see you all at the stage.
Thank you.
I've learned a lot from a lot of what you've said. So I'm torn between this diverse cast performing this production, which is, Jewish versus Christian in its day. Therefore, kids of color and so forth who come to see this play are going to walk away seeing it differently because you're all performing it and you don't look like the traditional Shakespeare actors. But really my question was this: is it time for a contemporary merchant, a newly crafted story that highlights a Black or a brown or an Asian Shylock in today's culture and world within the parameters of that kind of story that Shakespeare wrote? Is it time for that, or is it best that we stay with what the man wrote and we go from there and let people walk away with whatever they want to know?
If we went with what he wrote, the cast would be entirely male and white.
But in
So
today's world,
already away from
And not Jewish.
and not Jewish, and not Jewish, especially not Jewish.
well, that's another question for John Douglas Thompson. And actually for all of you, this is my second question. As all of you prepare for your individual roles for this production, regardless of your past experience with it or your knowledge of Merchant of Venice, do you watch past Merchant of Venice productions, movies, videos, etc., just to kind of sharpen your character based on what others have done?
I will say two things. The first thing is to answer your earlier question. We have to find a way to not center whiteness all the time. I have been acting Shakespeare for over 20 years. And one of the reasons why I did it or wanted to get into it, I love the language, of course, and I love the poetry, but I didn't see myself represented on stage. So what does that mean? Like, then I have to look at it and say, well, I'm not valued in this arena. This isn't for me. Although I love it, I can't do it. So I decided to reject that idea and try to do it and play the main roles. And one of the reasons would be for me to do that was so someone else who looked like me, younger than me, my same age, older than me, could see that they could do it too. So I want to be centered in this story. That's important to me. And that should be important to our culture. I don't want to see another Merchant of Venice that I've seen 50 times, because this gets me to your second question. Have I seen merchants on film or TV? Yeah, I've seen most of them. And you know what? I haven't seen myself or people who look like me barely represented in them, other than the role of the Prince of Morocco. So what does that say? What does that say? And I get frustrated where people don't want to see diversity, that they want to continue to see the same old thing, same old people, same old way. It's a rejection of diversity. It speaks to something deeper. And that's what we have to get past. And so for me, there's a political aspect to all of this. So yeah, I want you to come and I want you to see me and the rest of this Black and brown cast do the work to open you up so you can see other ways of viewing this kind of work and not center yourself or have the desire to center yourself in these worlds. And if you can't center yourself, then it has no legitimacy. So the last thing, I do watch a lot of films because I like to see what other actors have done. I like to see what their choices are. I like to see how other directors have framed the argument or what ideas they've come up with. It's really interesting to me. And sometimes I see things that, oh, yeah, that makes sense, or, oh, I don't really understand it. But I will say this, I don't necessarily judge it, but I am curious about it. The one thing that I do judge is the lack of diversity. That bothers me. That makes it so like it's not worth me watching it. If they don't value me or people who look like me, they're telling me they don't want to watch it. That's just not a world that I as a performer can exist in. It's unsustainable. It's unsustainable.
And it's not the world we live in.
And it doesn't even represent our community. I live in Brooklyn. I live in a Hasidic neighborhood, but there's many other nationalities and cultures within 2 blocks. And that's the beauty of being a New Yorker. We all know it. I can walk 3 blocks and see the world. But when I go see theater, I can only see white people. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I just want to say one quick thing to what John said, which is so powerful. You know, I believe very, very strongly that these plays belong to everyone. And there was there was certainly a time when people felt that Americans, people who were not British, should not do these plays. And that's just totally wrong. This play belongs to everyone.
Okay, I want to, this is a great conversation. I want to keep moving. Catherine Rogers from New York City. Catherine, you're up. Let's hear your question, please.
Thank you, Jeffrey, so much. Thank you to Fana and this company for such a beautiful investment in this play. I have never been moved to tears by Shylock before, but tonight I was, and I think because it touched me living in America right now. So thank you. And so my question is about that Shylock, the choices in Shylock, because the script, when we get to the scene where Shylock denounces Jessica and dwells on the jewel, that plays right into the stereotype of the money-grubbing Jew. That's what's on the page in a lot of ways. But the way you did it, directed by ARIN and John Douglas Thompson, your performance, I think there was something else happening that I couldn't put my finger on. And so I'm interested in how you negotiate that scene and what you feel is driving Shylock there.
That's so interesting, because that's what we were talking about. We were all, as a cast, as we were rehearsing a little bit today before doing the reading, we were going over a couple of scenes, and we went over that scene and we talked about the nature of Shylock and Jessica's relationship, as well as what seems to be written on the page is he's more fascinated with the money aspect and the loss of the daughter. But then ARIN was saying, and I think we all agreed, that it's a function of both, and maybe talking about money and replacing the daughter for the money, so that the money is spoken about, but what he's really saying as he talks about the money is he's talking about his daughter. The money is just an aspect of the level of the betrayal, but his emotion is the level of his love for his daughter. At least that's what I started to think about. And then I said, okay, well, let's go for it. When we do the reading, let's go for it and see if that will have any resonance, not only with me, but I'm glad that it had some resonance with you. And there is a way of looking at Shylock as all these characters, and I always think the best characters to play are outsiders. Those people who are outside of the norm that exists in the play. They're the most healthily written. They have the most emotional arc. They have the most interesting things to do. And so I look at someone like Shylock, and you can look at him in a couple of ways and say, he is a stereotype. He is a comedic figure. He cares about money more than he cares about human beings. He doesn't care about anything else. He wants to hurt Christians. He doesn't want to establish a friendship or whatever. So I'm just trying to, and certainly with the support of my cast, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. We sit and we talk about these things, and there's some wonderful people in this group who offered up ideas to me, whether they knew it or not, offered up ideas to me that were helpful in constructing the character for this reading. Who knows what it'll be as we move forward, right? But this is just for this reading. So I got a lot of information from my fellow castmates. But the reason why I'm saying this is it's interesting you bring that up, because that was just what we were talking about, is the Jessica, Shylock money thing, the love triangle.
Okay. Anyone else want to answer anything about the 2,000 ducats, or we can go to our next question? I don't want to, if someone has a thought, I don't want to stop them, or I can go to the next, because it's we're running out of time here. Is that okay? Should I move on? You all right with that? Okay. Thank you, Catherine. So the next question is from, I don't know the word, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Ali Tufo from Oakland, California. Ali, or please come up and tell me if I mispronounced or pronounced your name correctly. But you're up, please.
It's Allie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Allie.
Hi. So yeah, just really a New Yorker, and I'm stranded out here on the West Coast, and I completely and desperately miss all of you and Tefana, and it's just like making me nuts. So very quickly, before I might ask my question, like others have said, thank you so much, because we've been talking a lot about diversity and race and inclusion and equity where I work, and none of those conversations have been nearly as thoughtful or meaningful or interesting as this one just now. So I am just like so grateful to all of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just, I want to come home. Danaya, I wanted to ask if you could, I was interested in your comment about time, the way the play, you know, should reflect our current time, and if it doesn't, that it shouldn't be done. But I read a lot of Shakespeare, talk about it with my other Shakespeare, you know, groupies, and we've been talking about this, and somebody brought up the interesting notion that, and I want to know what you think of this because it fascinated me, that, you know, Shakespeare's so good and so powerful that 3 sets of times can be and should be reflected in the performance, in the productions, which is his own time, the time when it may be set, because it's been set in, you know, the 50s or the 1800s or whatever, and the current time. So I wonder if you could just talk about that a little more.
Sure. I think that we already, in doing Shakespeare, it is already his time, right? Like the language is his language. And we get to embody that language. So I think that takes care of his time, at least for me, because I love his language. I love that we get to dive into that time and do the research where, you know, for example, the word spurn that Antonio uses, Shylock uses, and then Antonio uses in their scene, we tend to, we know what spurn means for us now, to reject, but spurn back then, and it's in the text, also meant to kick. So Antonio has kicked Shylock. And I think that, you know, getting to do that kind of research into what this means and how do we embody it now, I think is very important, and it does take care of his time, and it's important for us to be the translators of that language, right, for the audience. And then in terms of what time it's set, I don't know, maybe Erin can speak to this. This feels to me like right now, the setting is now. And I kind of always want that for Shakespeare, because, you know, it's what John was talking about. And I'm gonna share something that's kind of crazy, but true. When I watched old movies when I was younger, I was like, when I was very young, 5 and 6, I was like, oh, Black people didn't exist in that society. Because that is literally what I thought as a child, because they weren't there. So in the 1950s, what, like all the serving people would be the people of color? I don't think anything should be set in a time where people of color were still serving white people, where whiteness was centered in such a strong way. It's still centered now in our society, but when it was centered by law, I don't see the benefits of setting any play, or Shakespeare at least, in those times. So I think it should be now, and I think it should reflect the world I see. And that's not to say that every one of Shakespeare's plays is about race, or that I want to always play a character that is in conflict about her race or their race. But I do
I do want to be in the world that I see around me. And I have relationships with people of all races and all ethnicities and all religions, especially being in New York, like John was saying. So I think that's what's important to me.
Thank you so much, Danaya. We have time for one more question. I just want to move to this last question because it's getting late. And this is from Andrea from Park Slope, Brooklyn. You're up, Andrea.
Okay. Hi. So one of the things in the play, and you were sort of talking about it. Okay, can you hear me? Or
yes, we can hear you.
One of the things in the play, and you sort of went through in the ducats thing of it's full of numbers. And actually, that particular the ducats and the daughter and duke, there's numbers and numbers and numbers until the very end of that, where there is that gorgeous, a wilderness of monkeys. I mean, that, and that strikes me as the climax of it, and where he's broken down and no numbers aren't doing anymore. He can't, instead, he doesn't come and say, no, I would have swapped the ring for, 10 monkeys. No, it's wilderness. But the play otherwise is full of numbers. It's full of, and the numbers like things get halved and then they get put together, or they get doubled, or Portia has something where she doubles something and triples something. And of course there's a risk and the whole risk thing is that there's the risk in the major sort of plot of Antonio's in this risky situation. The courting Portia is a risk. So there's the risk thing and counting that. And then there is one thing in it which is wildly not in that listed, which is Antonio at the very beginning, and this there's a bit of the title character of the play, who is way less interesting than others, he says that he's not worried because he has more than one bottom. Okay, so he's got ships now. And this is why I don't know if the Elizabethans would have known this, but I would expect they would. That's not the way a Venetian would talk. Now, if he said the obvious, oh, don't worry, I've got insurance, then you would never play. But the Venetians really knew how to handle risk, especially ships. And it would have been something like, well, actually, I have partial interest in 300 ventures, and a couple of them are backed by the state, and some of them have every Venetian is part of them. And I mean, it would have been a way more complicated and way less risky thing. And I don't know if it's just the people of the time, whether did they not know what the finances of Venice were like? And so they thought what Antonio was being reasonable? Or am I supposed to think that Antonio is kind of dumb, or basically reckless?
So Andrea, could I summarize your question then? Is for the company. You're asking, do you think that Shakespeare's audience, some of this is correct, Shakespeare's audience understood financial transactions in 17th century or 16th century Venice? Is that and how that affects the play, if they do or they didn't? Is that correct? Hello?
She's muted.
Yes, because they did take lots and lots from Venice, lots of accounting.
Right. So I'm asking, is that your question, is what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Okay. So does anyone want to take that on? Do you think that the play changes because of the audience's knowledge that the real world of Venice wouldn't have exposed Antonio in the way that Shakespeare exposes Antonio? In other words, does that make any difference to the audience's perception of the play? Anyone want to take that on?
I don't know who would.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question, because would audience members it's almost a question that I'd ask Shakespeare. How he wrote a story. I mean, I know my response to what happens with Antonio. Of course, there are probably merchants that were very risky and did great things, but I'm sure there were some that had ill luck and something happened with the ventures out at sea at a particular time. I
think bankruptcy is also,
Yeah.
you know, an eternal theme in plays.
Yeah, it's always
it's a powerful, it's a powerful conflict.
Yeah, something was always going to happen. You know,
Anyway.
my perspective as Shylock about Antonio, which may be the audience's perspective too, whether it's from that time or this time, is, and I list them. I say he's got an argosy for Tripoli, Mexico, Frankfurt. He's leased himself out.
He's heavily leveraged.
He's highly leveraged. And as we know in the marketplace, that could, you know, just takes a little thing to turn everything around. So I think Shakespeare is really smart in writing it that way, because it is like, yeah, something small can happen having large repercussions. And when I say ill luck, and he tells me all these things that have happened, that's what happened. Maybe it's a part of the whole thing about him, Shakespeare, building tension within the play. Antonio starts off obviously wealthy and he's got all these things going on, but it sets you up to say, uh-oh, something not so good is going to happen to this guy and his ventures. I don't know.
Thank you.
We got to
thank you.
talk. Thank you.
Well, it's food for thought. So I want to thank the company and I want to thank the audience. We could obviously go on talking about this for a long time. The way to do that is to come back on Saturday. So we want to see you again on Saturday. We want you to see us. And I want to thank the whole company for participating wonderfully tonight and sharing your insights and creativity with Theater for New Audience's audience. So I'm going to say goodbye then and good night, and we'll see you. Here's an applause for you all, and we'll see you. We'll see you on Saturday, 3 o'clock. Good night, everybody. Good night.
Night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night.